topic for the day. This is session 4. And as you know, I try to do it as systematically as possible. So we are dealing with topic 4 today. And the main heading or subheading you can call for this session is organizational culture, as you can see, and a specific model, that is the OCTAPACE model for organizational culture, has been designed by one of the father figures of HRD movement in India, Professor T.V. Rao, who was for a very long time a professor at IIM Ahmedabad. And then he was with XLRI for a few years. In fact, this whole HRD network that you know today, and he's also been active in ISTD. So he was the first president of National HRD Network, a very, very respected figure globally. And now post-retirement, he has his own company called TV Rao Learning Systems. So those of you who would like to know a little more about that can Google TV Rao Learning Systems Inc. or something he calls it. So TV Rao Learning Systems, you will get it. So the OCTAPACE model was designed by him. And among other people who were actively associated with him and who are father figures in HRD, one is Dr. Atreya. I have repeatedly talked about him. Then Uday Parikh, Professor Uday Parikh, who was a colleague of, senior colleague of Dr. T.V. Rao in IIM Ahmedabad. Those are the kind of people. So, moving on with our understanding of organizational culture. What is organizational culture? So, as you can see, organizational culture, the key thing is on the third line, you can see shared meaning. So broadly, an organizational culture is shared meaning. Shared by whom? Obviously, the members of the organization. Who are the members of the organization? The founders, the directors, and the employees primarily. And over a period of time, as is now the concept, that instead of shareholders, we talk of stakeholders. Shareholders are only one set of stakeholders. Shareholders have put in the money, so they are part owners of the company. But everybody, the employee contributes, the vendor contributes. Without the customer, no organization can exist because every organization has a purpose. So taken all of that together, today some people take a much more wider meaning, but essentially certainly people inside the organization, they must have a shared meaning which all of them respect. And that is what is a organization culture. Okay. So on a closer examination in this second para, you see a set of key characteristics. Basically, it boils down to a set of key characteristics that is valuable for the organization, that the organization values. And when we say organization values, obviously the people in the organization value these characteristics. That is why it becomes the organizational culture. There are 7 major characteristics. We'll deal with them. Here it says 7 primary characteristics. If you look at when you enter an organization, when you study an organization and you want to understand the culture of that organization, try to look at these 7 things is the suggestion here. And if whatever you get to know and understand about the organization on these 7 parameters, will give you a very good idea of what the organization culture for that organization is. So the degree to which, the first one, as you can see, is innovation and risk taking. The degree to which employees are encouraged to be innovative and take risks. Now, this is a typical contrast between a standard brick and mortar economy, manufacturing organization, where everything was set over a period of time and every process has to be followed to the T. only then can you, I mean, nothing wrong with that. If you have to produce a quality car or a quality computer, certainly that it will be a very, very important. Manufacturing, it is a key thing. Yes. But at the same time, if you do not innovate and take some risks, if you don't change the design of your car, then over a period of time, you will be eliminated. I am sure Shyamal and I tend to remember the not only Ambassador and Fiat, but the Standard Herald also, which gave up production somewhere in 1967 or something. So the idea is that what happened even after that, what happened to Ambassador? What happened to Fiat? These were huge companies. And by the way, Ambassador was a Hindustan Motors, which is a Birla company. So the moment Maruti came in with their new innovation and their design and all of that, and then if you look at the car industry today, so yes, the manufacturing process has a certain given set of standards that they have to follow. But on the other hand, there is continuous innovation and risk taking, launching of new models, etc., etc. And if you go to the other extreme, so manufacturing, it could be a mix of standard processes and innovation and risk taking. But if you go to the other extreme of the Googles and the Yahoos of this world, what do you find there? Everything is virtually innovation and risk taking. So these are the kind of contrasts. So an organization, how much of innovation and risk taking does it encourage is one parameter of what the organizational culture is. The second parameter to look at is what is the kind of detailing that the organization does, how much of attention it pays or its people pay to the details, the degree to which employees are expected to exhibit precision, analysis, and attention to detail. You know, there are certain industries which are very, very precise, and you have to. So please understand that it will always vary from organization to organization depending on the kind of business you are in. Every organization in every industry needs to have some amount of this. The degree will vary based on the business they are in. You know, there would be certain businesses which are very emotional. So their whole selling will be, and a kind of, in marketing jargon, they call it the elevator pitch, you know. So they will sing the song of this thing and, you know, have absolutely hardly any connect with what the product actually delivers at the technology level. That is not the buying criteria of the customer, right? So, and we had, luckily I have the exposure of a company where, you know, I worked for long years, where we had some products which were extremely highly, for example, not many outside of the automobile industry or the engineering industry know that Escorts also produces railway equipment, particularly air brakes, which is a very high-tech kind of a product, but you will never see an ad for a railway air brake because it is not a customer or a consumer-driven product. There is only one. That time there used to be only one customer, the Indian Railways. Konkan was there, of course, little bit. Now, of course, the metros are there. So there it was totally engineering. You don't need MBAs to sell those. You needed PhDs in engineering who can go and convince the railway engineers as to why our products are the best to sell, right? So attention to detail in technical terms is very, very important there. On the other hand, if you go to hospitality and all, yes, certain aspects of hospitality will need attention to detail. There would be standard operating procedures or practices, but at the same time, there's a huge emotional content which will be expected. So attention to detail, and which detail are you getting into? What kind of culture that particular organization has. The third element that you need to look into is what is the outcome orientation. And this is what I always lament, that in our culture, this is not the focus in our grooming process. Everything must start with what is the outcome we are looking at. Unfortunately, just to give a general example, you will find people saying, I have done my graduation, therefore I must get a job. I have done my MBA, therefore I must get a job. Now, why did you do your graduation? Why did you do your post graduation? Have you analyzed that this is the outcome I want and therefore this is my route? So that outcome orientation is not there. So the degree to which, at least in management, and as managements become more and more competitive, you have the degree to which management focuses on results and outcomes rather than on the techniques and processes. I am not at all saying that techniques and processes are not important. And this was a perennial point of discussion when I was visiting faculty with NIFT. And it was a long 13-year period, and they were great designers, but they would just design a fantastically creative product. But I would always tell them that if you want to make it a commercial success, then you also need to look at the paying capacity of the customer. So you will agree with me that most of the things that you see, the garments that you see in fashion shows, are they saleable in the market? So what is your business orientation? What is the outcome you are expecting? That must be one of the factors to understand what kind of organizational culture this organization follows, right? And all these factors have to be again considered once you decide that there is a need to change the organizational culture, right? People orientation. When management decisions are taken in this particular organization, whichever one you are studying, is it into consideration what is going to be the effect on the people within the organization, right? Because at the end of the day, people may write obituaries of HR day in and day out, but the fact remains that any organization is created by a human being, is run by human beings, and will not exist if other human beings don't use the products, that is goods and services created by that organization. So how you are affecting people, that becomes very, very important. And most of you would be familiar by now that in management jargon, the customer or the consumer is the external person to be kept happy for good business. But in order to keep that external customer happy, you just cannot make your internal customer, which are the employees of your organization, who are the employees of your organization, if they are happy, only then they will keep the external customer happy. Therefore, the term internal customer is used very frequently nowadays for the employees. And I remember a quote by Harold Schultz. Harold Schultz is the founder of Starbucks. Now, he said that the customer who comes and has coffee in my outlet is important, but the person who serves that to him is more important. So, and Harold Schultz created such a fantastic health plan for his employees that Bill Clinton, when he was the sitting president, invited Harold Schultz for a meeting over lunch to discuss whether that kind of policy can be done for the US government. So you can imagine that an individual company's policy was so interesting and so absorbing that the president of US, who is considered to be the most important or most powerful person on earth, he is invited by that person, right? So people orientation is to what degree? People forget that people, if they are handled well, they are your biggest assets. If not handled well, they could be your biggest liabilities. We need to understand this. So, what is this organization when it comes to its people orientation? That is another factor. Fifth factor that you need to consider for understanding culture is whether there is team orientation or there are brilliant individuals, but they can't perform as a team. The degree to which activities are organized around teams rather than around individuals. And the immediate thing that comes to my mind is Sachin Tendulkar was one of the world's best all through. But why did it need him to play 6 World Cups to win the trophy for India? First time he could contribute in India getting the World Cup was the 6th attempt. Of course, they went to it in 2003 also, which was his 4th World Cup. So, individual brilliance can contribute up to a certain extent, but team orientation, anything big that you have to achieve, you cannot have individual orientation, you have to have team orientation. And we have discussed teamwork as one of the methods of OD in a previous session, right? Now, aggressiveness. And if I don't send you these slides, then please remind me, some of you, those of you who have received the case study, those same emails I'll use to send these, because all slides I cannot cover in this short space. So you'll have some material to read more. So aggressiveness, the degree to which people are aggressive and competitive rather than easygoing. Now here again, a lot of people who are a little emotionally bent or predominantly emotional do not like the word aggressiveness. So they use the word assertiveness instead. Assertiveness is a more polite word, but essentially it says that, you know, you need not bend to people unnecessarily. But yes, if somebody is talking sense, you need to listen to that person. So the degree to which people are aggressive and competitive rather than easygoing, and what better example can I give you in current circumstances than China, right? Their aggressiveness and competitiveness has become more and more and more. And if my data is right, somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s, India and China were virtually the same economically. And today they are 5 times than us. I am not saying they have adopted the right route or just becoming an economic power or whatever, or, you know, their aspiration to rule the world is the ideal. I'm just giving an example of aggressiveness and how they have tried to dominate through aggressiveness and competitiveness. So some corporates you will also find are like that. Right? So how much of aggressiveness is there in their culture is an indication of their organizational culture. And the last one, the stability. So there are some organizations who were known, who are known, and probably will continue to be known amongst the best in the country or the world. So they have a very stable kind of existence over decades, centuries, whatever, right? I have an interesting piece of data somewhere with me which says that 1900, 120 years back, January 1, 1900, Wall Street Journal had given the list of the 12 most important companies in the US, right? And exactly 100 years later, on 1st January 2000, when the list was created, you will be amazed to know 11 of them had simply vanished. Only one survived for 100 years. And I don't know how many of you can guess, but because time is not exactly our friend, let me tell you that that company is a company which was set up by Thomas Alva Edison in 1878. and that happens to be GE. So stability, but that does not mean they have not undergone changes. When Jack Welch was heading GE, Jack Welch passed away on 1st of March this year, just before the lockdown began. So Jack Welch headed it for 20 years and he was nicknamed as Neutron Jack. Why? Because I think he terminated some 1,70,000 employees. He sold off businesses, he was ruthless, which may not have been the organizational culture, but that has ensured that they have been a stable company. Ups and downs will happen with every company, but they have been able to survive for almost 150 years now, right? It's 142 years to be precise. So this is the stability. In India also, you will find some companies which have not reached the top, but they are very stable companies, right? So the culture is, stability is more important in contrast to growth by hook or crook. Right? On the other hand, also you will have examples in your mind who have grown very fast but vanished also equally fast. I remember 2000, there was a joke going when IT industry and these .coms were failing miserably. There was no business model for them at that point in time. So people used to say .com, .gone. So, so .com, they had made it to .com and .gone. So they come and they vanish, right? So, in fact, Shumantra Ghoshal, late Shumantra Ghoshal, very respected international management guru, passed away at the age of 55, unfortunately, in 2004. Brilliant guy, and he had his origins in India to begin with, worked with Indian Oil. He had a major role to play in setting up of the Indian IESB in Hyderabad. So he had once said that out of every 1,000 companies that are set up, after 1 year, his data was that 900 would have closed down out of 1,000. After the end of second year, 90 more would have closed down. And after the end of the third year, 9 more would have closed down. So if you have survived for 3 years, then only you can expect to survive for some more time. So that is the kind of companies that come into being, getting created, and then they vanish. So these 7 factors have to be kept in mind when you are trying to determine the culture of an organization. I purposely spent more time on this because these are the pillars. So this part I will skip because, as I said, I can send you these slides. So these are, a little more detailing of the same expansion of the definition of organization culture. Now, let us come to an example. You are all familiar with Gillette. So the next 3-4 slides I found, when I was reading the story many years back, and I picked up from various different articles on Gillette, and this is what I've summarized for you. So as you can see, 1901 it was established. So it's a very old company, 19 years old. So you can read these details later, but let me bring you on to the innovation and attention to detail, which was seen in this company, particularly in the 90s, when it was headed by Alfred Zine. And Alfred Zine was facing a situation where in the 80s, a lot of disposable razors had come up and they were eating up royally into the market share of Gillette. So that was the challenge he was facing. So he increased the R&D spend, which was made in his time double of what the competitors were spending. I think 2.2% of the revenues he was spending on R&D, right? So look at the innovation and attention to detail. We just discussed those characteristics in the company culture. Just read through. and how they got such breakthroughs that they are even market leaders today. And how they achieved it, you can see here, breakthroughs like the sensor razor involving thousands of shaving tests and design modifications. The company's team of research scientists use microscopes to examine razor blades at atomic level, and high-speed videos capture the act of a blade cutting a single whisker. That is the attention to detail. That is the innovation level that they are into, which is why they can produce such products, right? Now, you see, this one explains further. On the average, it has been calculated that on the male chin, there are 15,000 bristles, and the razor is supposed to remove that, right? So Gillette, as I told you, in the 80s was facing a lot of humiliation. Market shares are going down. So saved from humiliation 8 years, because this was 90s, by the launch, this is this sensor razor, which has been discussed in the previous slide, right? Unveiled and even now, this had not one but two blades. But as they were launching this, mind you, they were already researching on what would be the next product, and which was launched 4 years later, which was Mac 3 in 1998, right? So see the R&D and see the innovation and attention to detail. One product is just being launched, but you are already into what next. So in May 1994, months before the Gillette company first shipped its hugely successful sensor XL, which of course became successful obviously post-launch, in the US, marketing plans were already underway for the product that would succeed the sensor XL, which was named Mac 3 later. Imagine 4 Gillette executives were already meeting the advertising company and to set the marketing agenda for a new razor blade. Now, this in management jargon is called self-cannibalization. And I have seen this happen in Escorts. We had a collaboration with Ford that time. So we had a model called, if you happen to know any farmer, you can check with them. Ford 3600 was a very, very successful model, premium tractor. And people used to wait कि हमें तो Ford 3600 ही चाहिए. But we cannibalized it and launched 3610. And farmers were very, very upset that such a wonderful tractor, why do you want to change this? But somebody in Ford and somebody at Escorts had decided that no, this is not the future. The future is in 3610. So at the cost of our own product, we bring in a better quality product, which the customers also don't know at that point in time that this will be better. The same thing happened with Honda City. Those of you who have traced the or have kept in track of Honda City, the old Honda City had a much more executive kind of look. But suddenly it was stopped in 2004 and this new was launched, right? Which is called the ugly duckling model. You know, the bonnet is facing down and all. Aerodynamically, this is a much better model. So initially, I remember those days because I owned a Honda City then and I owned a Honda City now. So I remember how much of a problem people had in their minds. But ultimately, this model succeeded and that. So self-cannibalization is a very, very difficult thing to do because there is a product of yours which is doing fantastically well in the market and you want to remove that product from the market and launch a new one with all its risks. Any new product can, sell like hotcakes or it may not be accepted by customers. So this is where the futuristic, the innovation, attention to detail. Because if you continue with your product for too long, Obviously, there would be, for example, in the 80s, what happened to Gillette, others would come up with alternatives, which customers will use and they will be able to do it much cheaper and everything. Like, for instance, the larger companies, why do they go for these, contract manufacturing? If you look at the labels of any of the premium products that you use by Levers or P&G or Reckitt Benckiser or whatever, these days it is very, this Lysol and Dettol and all of that. If you look at carefully, they are all manufactured by some other local small company, but marketed and branded by these major ones to save on costs, right? What the world does, why is China such a favorite? And unfortunately, in India, we are so emotionally driven that we keep on, cribbing on the one side about China, but at the same time, we want the cheap products. At the same time, we also want our workmen to get the highest possible salaries. Now, you can't have the cake and eat it too. China's working conditions, everybody knows, right? So, the kind of authoritarianism, if you remember, the doctor who first said about the coronavirus suddenly vanished, and ultimately he died of that. And his wife, I'm told, has just delivered a baby. So can you imagine? So this is how things have to be understood at the rational level. Yes, emotions are all very nice. For example, the other day I was watching on TV, people are breaking, their televisions made in China. Arey, what kind of a fool are you? You have invested your hard-earned money into buying some product. My phone is a Chinese phone, but yes, the next time I buy a phone when I have money, yes, I will change. But my hard-earned money has gone into it. I won't. What do I get by destroying it? China has already made the money on this particular device. So just emotions won't lead us anywhere. We have to have the right mix of rationality and emotionality. Yes, emotionally you decide that we will boycott Chinese products, but not immediately. You can't do that. China took 40 years. I told you 1980 or so, we were equals. So we also will need probably 30, 40 years. And remember, your enemy is not going to go and sleep away to glory and you progress. You have to constantly compete. It takes time. So you have to be strategic in your approach rather than just being emotional in your approach, right? So this is Gillette's story and self-cannibalization. So this is Zine. Now this is the key slide where it sums up his philosophy. Devoted 2.2% of the firm's annual sales to research and development, about twice the average of other consumer product companies. He predicted that his huge investment in R&D would result in 50% of Gillette's sales coming from products produced within the past 5 years. So if you keep on producing products and releasing them, launching them in the market, and customers keep on absorbing it, you are always ahead in the story, right? And you can see the result. The next sentence explains the company's sales actually doubled and its market cap value. I'm sure you all know what is market capitalization. It is the total number of shares multiplied by the market value of the share. That is the market cap. So soared from 6 billion in 1991 to 66 billion. Sales doubled. But look at the share pricing. 6 billion to 66 billion. 11 times in a space of 8 years. So that shows how Zine's, he passed away last year. As you can see, 1930 to 2019. And he was the one who brought this here. But at the same time, now this is again, you have to remember that one success will not mean that whatever you do later will also be a success. Gillette bought over Duracell, but that was not a success. And can you imagine a person of the caliber of Warren Buffett was a fan of Zine? So that is the level of the person and how they transform organizations, how they can visualize something which others have not. And for that, of course, there is a risk. No risk, no gain is a very old saying. Again, in the Indian psyche, you have this problem. हम risk भी नहीं लेंगे, हमें नौकरी तो सरकारी चाहिए, पर हमें salary private वाली चाहिए. You know, that kind of thing. So we need to understand that we have to be on our guard all the time. Does our organization, that is the important thing now we are coming to, we have a fine organizational culture, but will it stand the test of time in tomorrow's world? And as we discussed in term 1 itself, the VUCA world of today, the strategies need to be not based on the past data, but based on what might happen. So it's a question of scenario analysis. And I distinctly remember in that class we discussed, and I gave that example, and Shamal would be the best person to appreciate much more than even I, that Pakistan is not going to tell you that this is the time and this is the day and this is the place where we are going to attack. So how does the armed forces equip itself? They have to think of all possible scenarios. In a VUCA world, you have to think what all can be volatile, what all can be complex, what all can be ambiguous, what all can be uncertain, and therefore what permutations and combinations might come up. So you have to draw up maybe 20, 30, 40 scenarios and then prepare yourself according to that. So if there is scenario 1, my action is A. If scenario is B or 2, then my action is B. That is how you have to plan in today's day and age. So if you have a strong, first of all, one more thing on culture, as you can see the heading, that is the key. Culture is different from job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is whether you like it or not. But culture is about rationality. What is it? It's not about whether you like it or not. Organizational culture is concerned with how employees perceive the characteristics of the organization culture, not whether they like them or they don't like them. It is a descriptive one. यहाँ का culture में ये चीजें हैं. मुझे वो पसंद है, मुझे वो नहीं पसंद है. That will lead to my job satisfaction or the lack of it. Right? So research on organizational culture has sought to measure how employees see their organizations on these parameters, which relate again to those 7 factors. Does it encourage teamwork? Does it reward innovation? Does it stifle initiative? So those are the pertinent questions that you have to ask to understand organizational culture as it is right now, and then decide whether we are on a strong wicket or not. If there is a need, we will change to something different, and then comes the question, how will we change? And again, I might remind you, which I did in the first term, the 5 W's and 1 H is always very handy in any kind of analysis. This has been there since the time of Socrates. Though a lot of people give credit to Rudyard Kipling. In fact, Rudyard Kipling used the concept of 5 W's and 1 H in his poetry, in one of his poems in 1902. But the original idea came as far back as Socrates, right? So, and Socrates is supposed to be a person, was supposed to be a person who had a very peculiar way of conveying his thoughts. He was, in fact, he was poisoned for, I'm told, for one of those reasons. Ultimately, he died because he was killed rather, or murdered in a way. So he had this, in those grand old days, he had a system of conveying his ideas through these questions. He would never give a straight answer. He would encourage anybody who was discussing with him why, what, when, where, who, and how. So that becomes a framework even for OD and change of culture. So we will leave it at that for the moment. One important this part, this rest of it is descriptive, so you can understand. But three important things you have to derive from here. One is the contrast between organizational culture and national culture. So basically, the research clearly reflected, and that is true. The research was comparing IBM culture as a whole globally and IBM culture in Germany. And it was clearly found that in the German offices of IBM, the German culture prevailed. You can very well imagine in India, in the IBM office, now which functions would be celebrated? It will be Diwali, Dashera, Holi, Eid, whatever, rather than, of course, Christmas will also be there, but it probably the intensity of celebration will be more around this because that matches with the Indian culture, right? So that is another aspect, that how much of organizational culture should prevail globally and how much of Indian culture should come. I remember a very interesting thing that happened in Dabur. McKinsey's had come into the country when the country was opened up somewhere in the early 90s, and they were appointed as consultants for Dabur, and they were also new in our setup, that is McKinsey's. So they proposed something. They found out about this, had detailed interactions with the seniors and others, and they proposed that some of their senior people were not fit enough to continue and they had to go. So the younger Burmans were very impressed because they were all foreign educated and all of that, I'm told. But when it went to the senior Burmans, they said, nothing doing. These are the guys who have been with us for 30, 40 years. And what we are today is because of them. We can't suddenly throw out these people. So McKinsey's may have come with this whole concept of hiring and firing, which as a culture in US is perfectly fine, but it is not acceptable in India even today. So, and pardon my putting in this as an example, it's more for you to think over rather than, an opinion which you must accept. I mean, has any employee ever questioned that I have not contributed this year, why am I getting this raise? When a general increase is given, the good and bad performing employees, all of them get a raise. But the moment there is a question of, somebody not getting the increment or something, there's a huge cry. Now, in the initial stages of the lockdown, for example, people were not even willing to take a salary cut. Now, how do you explain that? When you have shared the good times and you never said that, I am not that competent, so I don't deserve. Has anybody ever said that I get paid more than what I deserve? But I am getting lower than that, everybody says. So these are issues to be thought of. I am not saying that there aren't brilliant employees who have contributed but still don't get their due. But are we really contributing to the extent of what the company is giving me or not is a very serious aspect of culture. So these are the kind of things that we have to keep in mind. This is a little more on that. And one last point on culture before we move to the OCTAPACE model. So what is the role of culture? So when there is a strong culture and established over years, for example, you have very less employee turnover in Tatas. There's a strong culture established over centuries. Now, one thing, however, happens on the negative side is that when things are stable, strong cultures are wonderful. But when situations like this happen, what is happening now, then strong cultures take much more time to change than comparatively flexible cultures. They adapt to new situations much better, which strong cultures are unable to. So that also becomes a negative, right? This part you can understand your own. I have said what culture functions, but more importantly, we need to come to the negative of culture. which is culture as a liability. So the first sentence itself says we need to deal with it as a non-judgmental manner, which means we are not saying strong culture is good and weak culture is not good or flexible culture is not good. We are not passing any value judgment. But whenever there is a strong culture, obviously it has benefits for the organization, but when this is the plus side. From an employee standpoint, culture is valuable because it reduces ambiguity. The employee clearly knows what is acceptable and what is not acceptable here. Okay, it tells employees how things are done and what is important. But we should not ignore the potentially dysfunctional aspects of culture, especially a strong one, on an organization's effectiveness. So what is that? It becomes a barrier for change. So now if given today's environment, exactly the values that were helping me to grow as an organization, perform brilliantly in the market, given the change of situation or circumstances, those values may not give me the best, but the organization has to remain effective. And that is where the problem comes. So when an organization's environment is dynamic, but because of the strength in its culture, it is not able to adapt to that. And that's exactly what happened to what I was saying earlier, whether they are the local Hindustan Motors or Premier Automobiles, of Fiat fame, or a Kodak company, or what you see, the Oyo and the, Airbnbs or the Olas and Ubers of this world, people, the complete business model has changed. Now, people who have crores worth of properties, huge hotels, now they suddenly find what to do. These guys are making much more money without owning a single hotel or without owning a single car. So this change, if there is a very strong culture, there will be a problem in those organizations to change to the new realities. So that is where it becomes a liability. Now let's move quickly to its model. I have given you a lot of details here in culture as a liability because in today's day and age, when we talk of OD and change management, we have to keep that as the most important consideration. Okay. There are examples here also of how mergers and acquisitions failed because of culture. Okay. This is another example here of Sony Corporation and how its culture was established by the co-founder, that is Akio Morita. This is how cultures are formed. This is how it impacts performance and satisfaction. So we have to look at, these are the same seven factors on the left-hand side column. Now we come to OCTAPACE model. As I said, it was created by Professor T.V. Rao. So what is this model about? Organizational culture, simply stated, means a common perception. Right in the beginning, we said that. Common perception held by the organization's members, a system of shared meaning. Now, no difference here. It is the collection of traditions, values, policies, beliefs. So see the complexity of culture. It is not just one thing. Part of our culture comes from traditions, values, policies, beliefs, attitudes. And when you talk of policies, 50 years back, some policy may have been established, but today that policy may not be relevant. But because it has been in existence for such a long time, that culture becomes a liability, that policy becomes a liability, right? time permitting, I could have given you any examples of how I have tackled with these actual situations. Let me give you a quick one. So we had a policy where general managers and above were entitled to company car with driver with all expenses paid. Below that, there were some restrictions. So this was a complete freedom. Now, what I started realizing was that because there was complete freedom, many of them, I would say most of them, were misusing this. I calculated for some of them, the car expenses were coming to such a high amount that even if you run a car for 24 hours a day, still that kind of expense is not justified. So obviously what was happening is that because they had this complete freedom, all other cars in the family, the spouse's car or kids' cars or whoever, was being financed through this scheme. Now the problem was that what do we do? So I sounded corporate finance to also calculate, and they came to the same conclusion. So then I went up to my corporate head of HR, vice president HR for the entire group, and I told him that this is what is happening, so we need to do something about it. So as he saw the point, and he says, okay, as is typical of bosses, day after tomorrow, let's have a meeting of all the HR heads, senior people in HR, different divisions, and let's try and see. So that meeting was held, and so most of them came up with, so he asked for suggestions. So barring two people, I and one more senior HR guy, everybody was of the opinion that, we need to put a ceiling. That is, let's say 10,000 rupees or whatever in those days, put a ceiling that this is the maximum we will do. So I told my the corporate head of HR that, you see, we have issued appointment letters to them saying it is at actuals. And now if we suddenly put a ceiling, we are going back on our words. HR would look very stupid. So he says, yes, I see your point, but then what is your solution? You only brought up this point, which is validly accepted by everybody. So I said, well, frankly, I don't have a solution as of now. So typical, senior director level people would, what do they say? Okay, day after tomorrow, we meet again on the same issue. By then, all of you are expected to give your doubts. This doubt has to be cleared. So I had no clue what to do because the other 10, 12 people had already said, put a ceiling. I was the one who was objecting, and one more guy, semi for my view. So I couldn't sleep the first night that what do I go and tell next meeting? If I again go and say I don't have a solution, then what is going to happen? So second night, which was the night before the second meeting, I just couldn't sleep at all. So it was somewhere in the middle of the night. I was thinking. So it suddenly struck me that what if we can, guise it in the form of some kind of, cost consciousness of the company and attach it with some other things. So those days we didn't have laptops and computers. So I got up and on my table, I started creating a circular. And in that I said that, given the high cost of operations and this and that, we need to, all employees are requested to become more cost conscious and not, try to save for the company and all. And henceforth, the following conditions will be applicable. Any conveyance reimbursement, car reimbursement bill exceeding 10,000 will be going to the president's office. President was the Rajan Nanda, who was the son of H.P. Nanda, the original chairman my time. He was the managing director and vice chairman and president for the operations purpose for approval. Now, I am not saying that you don't use it, do it, but it will be sent. So this is the thing I thought I will present. And in the meeting, the moment I said, sir, I don't know whether it will work or not, but I have this suggestion and I have made a little note on this. The moment I read up this circular that I had created, I didn't even finish. It says, yes, yes, done, done, done. So what I'm trying to say is, can you really find वो जो पुरानी हमारी कहावत है, सांप भी मर जाए लाठी भी ना टूटे. I am not saying you don't spend. We had given you the appointment letter saying actuals we will reimburse. Fine, we are still saying we will reimburse, but cost consciousness must come in, and these expenses will go to the president. Sure enough, next month onwards, it all became reduced. 9,900, 9,890, 9,950. Because then the scare in them was that, if only my bill goes there for approval, everybody's bill is within limits. What is this? So this is how you have to think of changing organizational culture. Just passing authoritarian rule may not have the impact that you can have. So this is where you have to balance out. Okay. So now directly plunging into Rao Saab's model, that when you are looking at an organization, you need to look at 8 things. So O stands for openness, C stands for confrontation, T stands for trust, A stands for authenticity, authenticity, yeah. P stands for proactivity, A stands for autonomy, C for collaboration, and E for experimentation. Now, let us look at these briefly. So, openness. Now, I am sure you are all experienced people. In life and in organizations, you will find that with certain people, you can afford to be open. They will not judge you. They will they may or may not agree with your view, but they will always believe that you have a reason to say what you are saying. They would be open to discussing, trying to find out whether their view is better or your view is better. That is the kind of thing that we put under openness. So whatever HR policies you create, whatever HR system you create, what is the level of openness you want to bring in? So there is nothing called completely open or completely closed systems. So no organization may be on the 2 extremes of the continuum, and the middle sentence says, but they tend to be. Some organizations are more open, where you can freely express your views. And this is again the difference between India and China, and a democracy and a dictatorial or an authoritarian regime. That is the difference. Same thing. Some organizations, you can walk into the office of the chairman or the director or something and air your views. That may or may not be implemented, but they are willing to listen. But there are other organizations you will keep a mile away. No way you can open your mouth. So that is the funda of openness. That is the first element of the OCTAPACE model. Okay. So this is a little detail on that. The second element is the confrontation element. So as Dr. Rao himself has said, that confrontation to him means, are we putting the front of the problem or we are trying to escape the problem, the back to the problem? Are we confronting? It is something like, catching the bull by its horn. So if there is a problem, acknowledge there is a problem and face it. So it's exactly like if I don't accept that I am not feeling well and I need to consult a doctor, what can the doctor do? So I have to confront my problem, my ailment. Whatever is there in the organization, we have to confront it, putting it in the front rather than at the back. And therefore, Dr. Rao himself suggests a better term would be confrontation exploration. Just confronting is not going to solve your problem. You have caught the bull by the horn. Okay, this is the problem. but you have to also explore, because your end objective, as when we started, we said anything in life must be objective driven. So the objective is solving the problem, not just confronting the problem, right? So in the second para, as you can see, if an organization encourages people to recognize the problem, bring it to the notice of the people concerned, explore with them, understand it, and search possible ways of dealing with it. That is the meaning of confrontation. So confrontation essentially includes the concept of exploring for solutions. So this is O and C. We come to T, trust. Very, very, very important. And the problem with trust is that you cannot know whether somebody is trustworthy or not unless you trust the person. The test will come after you have trusted the person. In advance, you will never know which person will cheat you. So therefore, I always say that I am willing to develop 100 relationships, knowing fully well that 20 of them will backstab me. But what is going to happen? Even if 20 backstab me, I still have 80 to help me, maybe 40, maybe 20, but at least somebody is there to help. But because of the fear of being cheated by 20, I do not develop even one relationship, because if I don't, the other alternative is I don't develop any relationship, then nobody can cheat me. So then who is left to help me? So you have to take this risk. Trust is always a risk. And only when you trust someone over a period of time, you come to understand whether this person is trustworthy or not. But be careful, not only maybe a person has been trustworthy over years, but then there are some people whose modus operandi is to create that element of trust. They will, just as an example, I'm not saying only in money terms it happens, but just as an example, they say, you give me 100 rupees, I'll give you back next month. So he will not only give you back, he will give you 110 back or something in some way. So you develop trust that he's trustworthy, then someday he takes 500. So in returns immediately, 550 or whatever there, some plus. So you gradually develop trust, but the day you share 5 lakhs with him, he vanishes, right? So we need to look at this very, very carefully, but without a level of trust. As you can see in the last sentence, a minimum level of trust may be deemed necessary for the introduction of the performance appraisal system and whatever other elements of HRS, human resource system. So this is trust. Then authenticity. Now, authenticity of an organization is based on, now, do you trust Sumit Chaudhary or you don't? What is it based on? So if you can possibly trust me, then you will say I am an authentic person. So authenticity is the value which underlies trust. It is the willingness of the person to acknowledge the feelings, accept himself, herself, as well as others to relate to him or her as a person. So the brown part you can read, authenticity is reflected in the narrowest between the stated values and the actual behavior. This is where you have to test whether this organization is authentic or not, whether this person is authentic or not. What does he say and what does he do? What does the organization say and what does the organization do? You know, typically, as it is said about politicians, that their message is, do what I say, don't do what I do. So their actions and words usually are at variance. And then obviously the authenticity goes down, the trust level goes down. So authenticity in an organization is the basis, rather trust is the basis for checking out on authenticity. Proaction and reaction, you are familiar with this, are servicing that get done. the mobile servicing that we get done. That is pro-action. The car has not stopped on the road, but we are still getting it done. So it is what is in manufacturing circles known as preventive maintenance. The machine has not stopped working, but we get maintenance done. When the summer season begins, we get our ACs serviced. Now the AC has not broken down, but it is preventive maintenance. But if some machine goes out of order, you tend to obviously get it rectified, but that is a reaction to something that has happened. So pro-action in the brown part, as you can see, means anticipating issues and acting to take advantage of this understanding. That means you are already projecting into the future and expecting something to happen, and you have already created a situation where you have stopped it from happening, right? So that is pro-action. अभी मलेरिया सीजन आने वाला है, पहले ही क्विनिन की 2 गोली खा लो भैया ताकि नहीं बीमार पड़ो. So proactive and reactive stances are this. So what is the level of pro-action? Is this organization only doing firefighting, which is a reaction, or we are equipped to handle the possibilities that can emerge? Now, something as this is typically legally called a force majeure, means some flood, some earthquake, something which is not in your control. You can never possibly, but then there also people have started taking action. If you are in that seismic zone, your building should have this, should have that, etc. So we try to do it. But a flood, when a flood will come, which year it will rain more, and it's very difficult. So everything cannot be pro-action, but if your pro-action typically is higher than reaction, you are in an organization which follows pro-action. Autonomy. Willingness to use the power without fear. I have the power, but do I take action using that power? So autonomy is having the power is one thing, but to use that power. So what is the model in this particular organization that we are studying on autonomy? First of all, whether there is power given to others, whether there is empowerment of others. And second, whether that empowering is actually resulting in those powers being used in practice. So organizations can vary in the sense of autonomy they may create for the members. So there are two things involved here. First, you have to study, is autonomy given to people? Is empowerment happening? That's the first level. And second level is, whatever powers are given, are they being effectively used? Right? So that is the autonomy part of organization culture. Then, do we have a collaborative culture? Do we share our problems with other employees and try to find solutions, taking into consideration the ideas of others? Right? So, using one another's strengths for a common cause. Individuals, instead of solving problems themselves, share their concerns, develop things happening. If you remember, in one of the previous classes, we dealt with quality circles. Now, quality circles is a typical example of this. I have a problem today on a particular machine or in a particular process, and you have also worked on that machine or that process. So I approach you that this is the problem I'm facing. Let's sit down and try to work out a solution. And it is quite possible that you have already handled this same problem a few days earlier or whatever, and therefore you have a ready-made solution to suggest. So if we pool in our thoughts, we are better equipped to handle the issues and problems. So that is the level of collaboration, is another facet of organizational culture. The last one, are you allowed to experiment? Right? What is the level of permission you have, directly or indirectly? Because unless you are permitted to do experimentation, you will never have innovation. So trying out newer ways of dealing with problems in the organization can happen only with experimenting. If today the world over research is on for finding a medicine, a cure for this COVID, now what is happening? It's all experimenting. You cannot say that, by today evening we will find a drug, because you have to keep on doing your hit and trials. So if the culture does not permit you to experiment, no new thing will ever come. There's a saying that, the only thing that is permanent is change. So experimenting means keep on working on something or the other. Out of that, if 100 experiments are carried out, maybe just one is successful. But that will take the company forward. That will take the organization forward. Right? So the second part, emphasis on quality improvement, for example, would mean doing something new and better each time. That is what experimenting is. If you do not try anything new, how will you ever come up with newer solutions? And there are wonderful examples of this which companies have tried out. Right? In the interest of time, it's already 5 minutes over time. So let us conclude the OCTAPACE model by these last 2 or 3 slides. A profile of an organization on these aspects may help to decide which elements of HRS may be introduced in which sequence in the organization. So there are 2 steps. One is, if you have a clear study on the OCTAPACE aspects, you would know how to create your HR system. HRS is HR system. And then you also come to know, because nothing happens overnight. Any major change you have to bring about. Just saying that tomorrow morning you should be doing this doesn't work in human behavior. You have to have the patience. So OD, one of the primary reasons why OD fails in many organizations is they are not willing to give it the time that it needs. And I keep on telling my clients, don't stir up things unless you are ready for the long haul. And there would be many unseen problems that will come up as we do, and we have to tackle all that. So OD always is a long-term process. So please analyze it from these perspectives as the OCTAPACE model suggests. Okay. So the various factors suggested above may be assessed while the system is being introduced, that is the HR system, in an organization, and perhaps taken into account while designing the system. Right? So thank you very much, but I don't know if we can have, if you have any doubt, we have already exceeded the time, but I can spend a little more time if the host permits. So we hope to meet next week and continue, but emails, please, that is very, very important.
Please send a direct message to me on my WhatsApp for the emails.
Right. Good, good. Thank you. Thank you. All the best.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thanks a lot, sir.